The blood beneath my fingernails had dried to the color of rust. I stared at my reflection in the marble-framed mirror of the executive washroom, watching crimson flakes dissolve under the scalding water. 23rd floor of the Meridian Tower. Corner office with a view of the city's throat. All those pulsing arteries of traffic. All those beating hearts below. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kendra Armstrong, senior partner. That's what the brass nameplate on my door proclaimed. What it didn't mention was the hunger that clawed at my ribs like a caged animal, or the way I could hear the janitor's pulse thrumming through the walls 3 floors down. I dried my hands with practiced precision, each movement calculated. The Cartier watch on my wrist read 11:47 p.m. Perfect. The building would be nearly empty now, save for the security guard nursing his 3rd cup of coffee in the lobby and whatever poor associate was burning the midnight oil trying to impress the partners. My phone buzzed against the Italian marble countertop. A notification from the dating app, Velvet Match. How deliciously appropriate. Trevor, Outdoors 42. Still on for tonight? Can't wait to meet you. I smiled at my reflection, and for just a moment, let my canines extend to their full, predatory length. Trevor, 28 years old, marketing executive, recently divorced. He lived alone in a converted warehouse in the arts district. No close family, no roommates. Perfect. Absolutely. See you at midnight. Can't wait either. The hunger stirred deeper, and I pressed my palm against my stomach. Control. Always control. I'd learned that lesson the hard way, back when Charlemagne still thought he could conquer the world, and I was just another merchant's daughter in a plague-ravaged village. 3 centuries of refinement had taught me that patience yielded far better results than the crude savagery of my early years. I smoothed my Armani suit jacket and checked my lipstick, Chanel Rouge, the color of fresh arterial blood. Fitting. The elevator descended in silk-smooth silence, carrying me toward another night's hunt. But as the floors ticked by, something nagged at the edge of my consciousness. A scent I'd caught earlier in my office during the consultation with the new client. Bitter herbs and old leather mixed with something else. Something that made my instincts prickle with unease. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the marble lobby. My heels clicked against the stone in a rhythm that matched my pulse. Slow, steady, eternal. The security guard looked up from his magazine and nodded. Working late again, Ms. Armstrong. You know how it is, Dimitri. Justice never sleeps. He chuckled, not knowing how true that statement was. I'd been awake for 72 hours straight, and I wouldn't need sleep for another week. The advantages of immortality. Outside, Seattle's October wind cut through the financial district like a blade. The scent of rain hung heavy in the air, mixing with exhaust and the underlying copper tang that always seemed to follow me. I pulled my coat tighter and walked toward the parking garage, my thoughts drifting back to that consultation. Jericho Mosely. The name rolled through my mind like smoke. He'd wanted to discuss a complex inheritance dispute, old money, family trusts, the kind of work that paid 7 figures and kept lawyers in Italian leather for decades. Standard fare for Shells, Peel, and Jones. But something about him had set my teeth on edge. It wasn't his appearance. He was attractive enough, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of rugged features that suggested he'd earned his scars honestly. Dark hair touched with premature silver at the temples. Hazel eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my office. The expensive watch, the first edition law books, the fresh orchid on my desk that I replaced every 3 days because dead flowers offended my aesthetic sensibilities. No, it was the way he'd looked at me. Not with the usual mixture of professional respect and barely concealed lust that I cultivated in my male clients. His gaze had been evaluative, clinical, like he was studying a specimen. I reached my car, a black Porsche 911 Turbo that purred like a satisfied cat when I turned the key. As I pulled out of the garage, I caught sight of a man standing in the shadow of the building across the street. Tall, broad shoulders. Something familiar about his silhouette that made my blood sing with recognition. But when I looked again, he was gone. 3 days later, Jericho Mosely sat across from my desk again, and I found myself studying the lines around his eyes. Worry lines, grief lines, the kind that came from years of carrying a weight too heavy for one man's shoulders. "The Ashford estate is more complicated than I initially described," he said, sliding a thick manila folder across the polished mahogany. "There are irregularities in the documentation." I opened the folder, my fingers brushing against his as I did. His skin was warm, almost feverish, and for a moment I caught that scent again. Bitter herbs, old leather, and underneath it all, something metallic that made my predatory instincts hum with interest. Irregularities? I flipped through the pages, noting the careful way he watched my reaction. "These documents appear to be in order, Mr. Mosely. 19th century property transfers can be convoluted, but nothing here seems..." Page 47. I turned to the indicated page and froze. The document was a death certificate, dated 1847. The name at the top made my blood run cold. Kendra Ashworth, my maiden name. From my human life. I looked up sharply, but Jericho's expression remained neutral, almost bored. "Family resemblance," he said mildly. "Quite striking, don't you think?" My fingers tightened on the document. In all my centuries of careful identity creation, I'd never been careless enough to leave a trail this obvious. Unless... "Where did you acquire this document, Mr. Mosely?" "Estate archives. Took considerable effort to locate." He leaned back in his chair, and I noticed the way his jacket hung slightly open, revealing what looked like a leather holster. "I'm very thorough in my research." The hunger stirred, but not for blood, for answers, for the truth behind those evaluating eyes. "And what exactly do you hope to accomplish with this research?" "Justice," he said simply. "Long overdue justice." The word hung between us like a blade. I set the document down carefully, buying time to think. Outside my office windows, the Seattle skyline stretched toward gray clouds that promised rain. Always rain in this city. It was one of the reasons I'd chosen it. The constant moisture in the air helped mask certain scents. "Mr. Mosely," I said finally, "I'm beginning to suspect you're not here about an inheritance dispute." "No," he agreed. "I'm not." He reached into his jacket, not for the weapon I'd glimpsed, but for a photograph. He placed it on my desk with the careful precision of a man laying down a winning hand. The woman in the photo was beautiful. Dark hair, warm brown eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. I'd seen that smile before, up close. I'd watched it fade as the life drained from her eyes. "My wife," Jericho said. "Marissa Mosely. She disappeared 5 years ago after meeting someone through a dating app. Velvet match." My hands remained steady, but every instinct screamed at me to run. Instead, I picked up the photograph, studying it with the detached interest of a professional. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Mosely, but I fail to see how this relates to..." Her body was found 3 weeks later, drained of blood, mutilated. His voice never changed tone, but something shifted in his eyes, something dark and hungry. The police called it a random attack, but I knew better. I set the photograph down. "Mr. Mosely, if you're suggesting..." "I'm not suggesting anything." He leaned forward, and I caught that scent again, stronger now. Not just herbs and leather. blessed silver, holy water, the tools of a very specific trade. I'm stating facts. 5 years of research, 17 victims, all connected through velvet match, all found drained and mutilated, all linked to one user profile. My throat felt dry, an impossibility for someone who hadn't needed to swallow in 3 centuries. And what profile would that be? He smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about it. Kendra, attorney. Ring any bells? I could have killed him then. One swift movement and Jericho Mosely would have been nothing more than another unfortunate accident. Heart attack brought on by stress, tragic but not uncommon in high-powered legal circles. Instead, I found myself intrigued. You're either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Mosely. Both, probably. He gathered up the documents but left Marissa's photograph on my desk. But I'm also very patient and very, very thorough. What do you want? To finish what I started 5 years ago. I stood and walked to the window, my back to him. The city sprawled below us, millions of hearts beating in perfect ignorance. How many of them would I outlive? How many more would feed my eternal hunger? Tell me about your wife, I said without turning around. The silence stretched long enough that I began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. She was a prosecutor, violent crimes unit, specializing in cases involving missing persons. He paused. She had this theory about certain serial killers, predators who seemed to operate for decades without aging, without changing their methods. She called them eternals. I turned from the window. Interesting theory. She was gathering evidence, building a case that would have changed everything. His hands clenched into fists. Someone stopped her. And you think that someone was me? I know it was you. He stood, moving with the controlled grace of a trained fighter. The question is, what happens now? The hunger clawed at my ribs, demanding action. But something else stirred beneath it, curiosity. In 3 centuries, no one had come this close to the truth. No one had dared confront me so directly. You mentioned patience, I said. How patient have you been, Mr. Mosely? 5 years of hunting, following trails of blood across 3 states, learning everything there is to know about creatures like you. His smile held no warmth. Did you know there are still families who remember the old ways? Bloodlines that stretch back to the Crusades, trained to hunt your kind? My blood chilled. The covenant of the Silver Dawn. I'd thought them extinct, wiped out in the purges of the 18th century. The covenant died 200 years ago. The covenant adapted. He reached into his jacket again, and this time he did draw the weapon. Not a gun, but something far more dangerous. A silver blade inscribed with symbols that made my vision blur. We learned to hide, to wait, to study our prey as carefully as they study theirs. The pain hit me like a physical blow. My knees buckled, and I gripped the edge of my desk for support. The blade's mere presence was agony, but I forced myself to remain standing. Impressive, I managed. Consecrated silver, anointed by, let me guess, Vatican archives? Or did you find one of the old Orthodox monasteries? Both. He didn't lower the blade, but he didn't advance either. 3 years of searching before I found someone willing to perform the proper rituals. And now what? You kill me here in my office? Rather public for an ancient vampire hunter. No. He sheathed the blade, and my relief was immediate. That would be too easy. Too quick. I straightened, smoothing my jacket. Then what do you propose? A game. His eyes held mine, and I saw something there that chilled me more than his weapon ever could. Intelligence. Planning. The infinite patience of a predator who'd learned to think like his prey. You've spent centuries perfecting the art of manipulation. Let's see how well you handle being the one who's hunted. That night, I didn't hunt. I sat in my penthouse 30 floors above the city and tried to remember the last time I'd felt genuine fear. The French Revolution, perhaps, when the mobs had burned anything that reminded them of the aristocracy. Or maybe earlier, during the plague years, when death walked so openly that even creatures like me had to be careful. But this was different. This was personal. I poured myself a glass of wine, a 1787 Chateau de Quim that had cost more than most people's cars. The irony wasn't lost on me that I couldn't taste it anymore. Food and drink had become mere props in the performance of humanity. The photograph of Marissa Mosely lay on my coffee table, accusatory even in death. I picked it up, studying her features in the lamplight. She'd been beautiful, yes, but there had been something else. An intelligence behind her eyes that had made the hunt more challenging, more satisfying. My phone buzzed. Trevor from the dating app, wondering why I'd stood him up. I deleted the message without responding. The hunger gnawed at me, but feeding now would be reckless. Jericho would be watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching. If Jericho Mosely wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules. The Covenant of the Silver Dawn. I'd thought them nothing more than a historical footnote, a collection of zealots and madmen who'd convinced themselves that monsters walked among humanity. The irony was that they'd been right. According to the records I could access, the last confirmed Covenant member had died in 1823, burned at the stake by the very church that had once supported their cause. But if Jericho was telling the truth, I dug deeper, following electronic trails through genealogy sites and historical archives. The Mosely name appeared in connection with the Covenant as far back as 1692. The Salem witch trials, a family of hunters who'd hidden their true purpose behind accusations of witchcraft. Clever. I found records of other families too, bloodlines that had supposedly died out, but whose descendants still carried the ancient knowledge, still passed down the weapons and rituals needed to hunt creatures like me. My research was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. I looked up from my laptop to find my living room window spiderwebbed with cracks. A small hole in the center suggested a bullet, but that was impossible. I was 30 floors up, and the nearest building with a clear line of sight was... Another window exploded inward, and I threw myself behind the couch as shards of glass rained down. Not bullets. Something else. Small projectiles that hissed and smoked when they hit the hardwood floor. Blessed silver shot. I crawled toward my bedroom, where I kept certain emergency supplies. The pain from the silver fragments was already making my vision blur, but I forced myself to focus. He wasn't trying to kill me. Not yet. This was a warning, a demonstration of might. My phone rang as I reached the bedroom door. Unknown number. Impressive response time. Jericho's voice was calm, conversational. Most of your kind would have tried to charge the window. Where are you? Close enough. I could hear the wind in the background. He was somewhere high up, probably the construction crane on the building site 6 blocks away. Did you enjoy your research tonight? I pulled a silk robe from my closet, checking for hidden weapons. You've been monitoring my internet activity? Among other things, you're not the only one who's good at surveillance, Kendra. May I call you Kendra? Or do you prefer your original name? The casual use of my real name sent ice through my veins. How much did he know? What do you want, Jericho? I want you to understand something. For 5 years, you've been the hunter. From now on, you're the prey." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Sweet dreams, Kendra Ashworth. Try not to let the silver poisoning keep you awake." The call ended. I looked at my hands and saw he was right. Silver burns were already appearing on my palms, where I'd crawled through the fragments. The pain would be manageable for now, but silver poisoning was cumulative. Enough exposure would weaken me, slow my reflexes, make me vulnerable. He was playing a longer game than I'd realized. The next 3 weeks became a careful dance of predator and prey, though I was no longer certain which role I played. Jericho Mosely became a fixture in my professional life. He scheduled regular consultations, always with legitimate legal questions that required my expertise: estate planning, corporate law, and international property transfers. He paid his bills promptly and in cash, the model client. But I could feel him watching, studying, learning my patterns, my habits, my weaknesses. The silver attacks continued sporadically, never enough to cause permanent damage, but sufficient to keep me constantly on edge. A blessed coin slipped into my coffee, silver dust in my office air conditioning, holy water mixed with the cleaning solution used on my office windows. Each incident was subtle, deniable. Accidents that could be explained away if anyone bothered to investigate. But they served their purpose, wearing down my defenses, forcing me to expend energy on constant vigilance. The hunger grew worse. I'd gone 4 weeks without feeding, the longest stretch in decades. My control was slipping. I could hear heartbeats through office walls, smell the copper-sweet scent of blood from 3 floors away. My canines had begun extending involuntarily during meetings, forcing me to practice speaking without showing teeth. Jericho noticed, of course. He always noticed. "You look tired," he said during our latest consultation, his voice carrying false concern. "Perhaps you should take a vacation." "I'm fine." The words came out harsher than intended. I modulated my tone, remembering my role. "Just busy. You know how it is during merger season." "Of course." He opened his briefcase and withdrew another folder. "I have some additional documents that need review. Family trees, genealogical records. Fascinating how bloodlines can be traced back centuries, don't you think?" I opened the folder and felt my world tilt. The documents were meticulous: birth certificates, death records, marriage licenses. But these weren't random genealogical records. They were my family tree. Every identity I'd inhabited over the past 3 centuries, every carefully constructed persona, names I'd forgotten, faces I'd worn like masks. Kendra Ashworth, merchant's daughter, dead of plague, 1674. Catherine Ashmore, seamstress, disappeared, 1698. Katerina Ashbrook, governess, missing, presumed dead, 1723. Catherine Ashton, lady's companion, lost at sea, 1751. The pattern was clear to anyone who knew how to look for it. Death followed by resurrection. New identity, new location, new life built on the ashes of the old. "Remarkable family resemblance," Jericho observed mildly. "Almost like they're the same person." My hands trembled as I closed the folder. "Mr. Mosely." I particularly enjoyed the death certificate from 1674. Cause of death listed as wasting disease. But the interesting thing about that particular outbreak is that it wasn't plague at all. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. It was vampirism. An entire village turned, then systematically hunted down and destroyed by the local Covenant chapter. All except one girl who was clever enough to play dead until the hunters moved on. The room felt airless. In all my centuries, no one had pieced together this much of my history. No one had come this close to the truth. "What do you want?" I whispered. "I want to know about Marissa." His calm facade cracked slightly, and I glimpsed the rage beneath. I want to know how she died. I want to know why. I could have lied. Should have lied. But something in his voice, grief mixed with desperate hope, made me pause. You won't like the truth. Try me. I told him everything. Not because I felt guilty. Guilt was a luxury I'd abandoned centuries ago. Not because I feared him, though his silver weapons and ancient knowledge demanded respect. I told him because, for the first time in my immortal existence, someone had earned the right to hear it. She contacted me first, I began, pouring myself another glass of wine I couldn't taste. 3 months before, you thought she disappeared. She'd been investigating the missing persons cases, following the same patterns you discovered later. Jericho's face remained stone, but I could smell the change in his scent, adrenaline mixing with something darker. Marissa was brilliant, obsessive. She'd connected dots that law enforcement had missed for decades. I walked to the window, careful to avoid the areas where silver fragments might still linger. She knew what I was before our first meeting. Impossible. She would have told you? I turned back to him. Would she? Think carefully, Jericho. In those final months, how much did your wife share about her work? The silence stretched between us. I could see him replaying memories, searching for clues he'd missed. The late nights, the locked files, the way she'd sometimes look at him like she was memorizing his face. She was protecting you, I continued. From me, from the truth, from the choice she'd already made. What choice? To join me. The words hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white with strain. You're lying. Am I? I returned to my desk, opened the locked drawer where I kept certain mementos. The photograph I withdrew showed Marissa, but not as Jericho remembered her. This woman's eyes held predatory hunger, canines extended, blood staining her lips. This was taken 6 weeks after her supposed disappearance. Jericho snatched the photograph, studying it with desperate intensity, looking for signs of digital manipulation, for any evidence that I was deceiving him. He found none, because there were none. She came to me seeking justice, I said softly. All those victims, all those families destroyed by creatures like me. She wanted to make it stop, but hunting vampires alone is suicide, so she proposed an alternative. No, but his voice lacked conviction. She would become one of us, learn our weaknesses from the inside, then systematically destroy every vampire in the Pacific Northwest. I smiled at the memory. It was a brilliant plan. Almost worked too. The photograph trembled in his hands. What happened? What always happens when humans try to play God. She underestimated the hunger, thought she could control it, use it as a tool for justice. I shook my head. The first time she fed, she killed a child, 7 years old, walking home from school. Jericho made a sound like a wounded animal. That's when she broke. The guilt, the self-hatred, it consumed her faster than the bloodlust. She begged me to end it, to make the pain stop. I moved closer, drawn by the scent of his anguish. So I did. I gave her what she wanted. You murdered her. I freed her. The distinction mattered, though I couldn't say why. She died human, Jericho. In the end, she chose to die human rather than live as a monster. He looked up at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen in a human's eyes when they learned the truth. Not just horror or rage, but understanding. the terrible clarity that came with having all the pieces of a puzzle finally fall into place. The body they found, staged, necessary to close the case and protect you from further investigation. I sat on the edge of my desk, close enough to smell the blessed silver he carried. Your wife loved you, Jericho. Everything she did, joining me, hunting monsters, even dying, she did to protect you from this world. He sat in silence for a long time, the photograph clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Outside, Seattle's eternal rain fell, washing the city clean for another day. Why tell me this? He finally asked. Because you've earned it. Because in 5 years of hunting, you've shown more dedication to justice than most humans manage in a lifetime. I paused. And because I'm curious to see what you'll do with the truth. He looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment when grief transformed into something far more dangerous. I'm going to kill you, he said simply. I know. I smiled, feeling genuine emotion for the first time in decades. The question is whether you'll be able to live with yourself afterward. 3 nights later, Jericho came for me. I was waiting in my penthouse, the lights dimmed, classical music playing softly from hidden speakers. Vivaldi's 4 Seasons, winter, specifically. The irony seemed appropriate. He'd disabled the building's security with professional efficiency. No alarms, no witnesses, no electronic trail to mark his passage. I heard him ascending the stairwell, his heartbeat steady despite the 30-floor climb. He'd trained for this moment, prepared his body as carefully as he'd sharpened his weapons. The lock on my door clicked open with barely a whisper. Advanced lock-picking, another skill he'd acquired during his years of preparation. He entered like smoke, silver blade already drawn, blessed bullets loaded in the pistol holstered at his hip. You're early, I said without turning from the window. I expected you to wait until midnight. More dramatic. Dramas for amateurs. His voice came from behind me, close enough that I could smell the holy water he'd used to anoint his weapons. I'm here to finish this. Is that right? I turned slowly, my hands visible, making no threatening moves. Or are you here because you need to understand something else first? The blade trembled slightly in his grip. What are you talking about? The real reason Marissa sought me out. The truth you haven't asked about yet. I smiled sadly. Sit down, Jericho. Please, before you do something we'll both regret. I'm not here to talk. But you are here to learn. Otherwise, you would have killed me the moment you walked through that door. I gestured to the chair across from my living room. 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes to tell you about your wife's final request. He hesitated, and I saw the war playing out behind his eyes. The hunter's training demanding immediate action, the human heart needing closure. Love won, as it usually did. He sat, but kept the blade ready. Marissa made me promise something before she died, I began. If anything ever happened to her, if her work led to consequences she couldn't foresee, I was to watch over you, protect you from the darkness she'd been fighting. Protect me? He laughed bitterly. By stalking me for 5 years? By staying away from you for 5 years? I met his eyes. Do you really think it took me this long to identify the man hunting me? I've known who you were since the first victim's body was found with traces of silver in the wounds. I've known where you lived, where you worked, every step of your investigation. The blade wavered. That's impossible. Is it? How many times did you feel like you were being watched, only to find empty streets? How many leads came together just a little too easily? How many sources provided information they shouldn't have had access to? I leaned forward. I've been helping you, Jericho, guiding your hunt, making sure you had everything you needed to find me. Why? Because Marissa was right. This cycle has to end. Not just my feeding, but all of it. The endless hunt, the rivers of blood, the corruption that spreads every time someone tries to fight monsters by becoming one. I stood, moving slowly toward the window. She asked me to make sure you had the choice she never did. What choice? To walk away, to live a normal life, to honor her memory by choosing light instead of darkness. I pressed my palm against the glass, watching the city lights blur through the rain. I've been preparing for this night for 3 years, Jericho. Teaching you everything you needed to know, giving you every weapon you'd require. But I've also been hoping you'd realize that revenge won't bring her back. The silence stretched between us, filled only by Vivaldi's strings and the distant sound of traffic far below. She's gone, I said softly. Marissa is gone, and killing me won't change that. It'll just make you into the very thing she died fighting against. I heard him stand, heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor. When I turned, he was directly behind me, the silver blade positioned at the base of my skull. One thrust would sever my spine, and 3 centuries of existence in an instant. You killed my wife. Yes, you've murdered 17 innocent people. Yes, you're a monster. Yes. I closed my eyes. But you're not. Not yet. And that's the only thing that matters. The blade pressed against my skin, cold as winter moonlight. I could feel it beginning to burn, the blessed silver reacting to my undead flesh. Marissa loved you, I whispered. She loved you enough to become a monster herself, if it meant keeping you safe. Don't dishonor that sacrifice by following her path. For a heartbeat, I thought he would do it. End my existence and damn his soul in the process. The blade pressed deeper, breaking skin, sending lines of fire through my nervous system. Then he stepped back. I can't, he said, and his voice broke on the words. God help me, I can't. I turned to face him, blood trickling down my neck. That's what makes you human, Jericho. That's what she died to preserve. He lowered the weapon, his hands shaking with exhaustion and grief. What happens now? Now you go home. You grieve. You heal. You find someone new to love. Someone worthy of the man Marissa knew you could be. I walked to my desk, opened another drawer, and withdrew a thick envelope. This contains the evidence you'll need to expose my feeding grounds, the locations where other vampires in the region operate. Take it to the FBI's Supernatural Crimes Division. Yes, they exist, though they prefer to keep that quiet. He stared at the envelope like it might bite him. You're just giving up? I'm choosing to end this cycle the way Marissa would have wanted, with an act of redemption instead of revenge. I held out the envelope. Take it, Jericho. Finish her work. Save the lives I would have taken. He reached for it slowly, as if expecting a trap. When his fingers brushed mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced in centuries. Hope. Will it hurt? He asked quietly. When they come for you? Probably. I smiled. But not as much as living with what I've done has hurt. Not as much as carrying Marissa's death has hurt you. He tucked the envelope inside his jacket, next to the silver weapons that could have ended my existence. I should kill you anyway. Yes, I agreed. You should. But we both knew he wouldn't. Marissa had chosen her champion well. He walked to the door, then paused without turning around. Did she... At the end? Was she at peace? I thought of Marissa's final moments, the relief in her eyes when she realized her suffering was ending, the way she'd whispered his name with her last breath, not in accusation, but in gratitude. "Yes," I said. "She was thinking of you." He nodded once, then left without another word. I poured myself one final glass of wine and settled into my chair to wait. The FBI would take at least 6 hours to mobilize its supernatural response team. Dawn would break in 4. I'd chosen the timing carefully. Better to face justice in sunlight than darkness. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing Seattle clean for another day. I closed my eyes and listened to the city's heartbeat, all those millions of pulses that would continue long after mine had stopped. For the first time in 3 centuries, I felt ready to rest.